just pops up reminding me that the session is being recorded, which I was going to mention to you anyway, so it is being recorded. If I could just please say any questions that you've got, if you could put in the Q&A box. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom webinars by now, but we've got a fantastic panel of experts here to answer your questions and to guide you and help you, so do please ask away. My name is John Woodruff. I'm Business Support Manager at Hertfordshire Chamber of Commerce. This, as I said, is EU Transition Question Time, and the last in our current series, and a series of webinars we've done in partnership and collaboration with our colleagues at the Hertfordshire Growth Hub. All the previous EU transition webinars on GDPR, VAT, etc., are available for viewing still on our websites. I think without further ado, time's already clicking on, so we want to get as many questions in as possible. If I could introduce to you Lisa Armstrong, who is the Business and Strategic Development Manager at Hert's Growth Hub, to say a few words. Lisa, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, John, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give you a very brief presentation just to provide an overview of the Growth Hub services. As John said, we've been working closely with the Chamber on providing these EU transition support webinars, and the Growth Hub, as well as providing advice and guidance on EU transition. We also have a number of programmes that I just wanted to provide a brief overview on for you. So just for those of you who aren't aware, the Growth Hub is led by and delivered on behalf of Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and we are delivered by a consortium of partners led by Support Exemplis with the University of Hertfordshire and Hertfordshire Chamber of Commerce. Our support, importantly, is free to access to businesses of all shapes and sizes, including the third sector. Really what the Growth Hub is that central point of access to business support in the county. We unlock support for a wide variety of issues that as businesses you may all be facing. A lot of businesses come to us quite often with one initial inquiry and then are really surprised at all of the other things that the Growth Hub can provide for them. So we're able to provide things like fully funded staff training through the Skills Support for the Workforce programme. We'll also be able to provide advice on funding options and get businesses fit for finance, as well as provide regulatory and compliance advice through our partners at Better Business for All and Hertfordshire County Council, and also be able to link you up to the support available at the University of Hertfordshire, for example, through their incubator and other programmes that they run. I just wanted to outline one of the programmes that we support businesses on, and that's our ERDF funded programme Get Growing Too, which is an intensive package of support for businesses. We have got one of our growth account managers here this morning, Brian Stammers, and Brian will be able to provide you in the panel just some idea of the support that he can offer to businesses around EU transition, but also more general aspects of business advice as well. So the Get Growing Too programme really does link you up with specialist support from the growth account managers who are able to provide an in-depth analysis of your business and understand more about the support that you're going to need and put together an action plan to support you with that. As part of that programme, there is also a match funded grant, which has recently been increased to £10,000. So if you would like more information on that, please do just ask. We also have the Volunteer Business Support Scheme that launched last year, and that's run in partnership with our colleagues at the University of Hertfordshire. And this is really a programme providing free and confidential one-to-one mentoring, really designed to help businesses bounce back and adapt their businesses as a result of the changes they've experienced because of the pandemic. We also have a wellbeing and resilience programme, and again this was created last year because we know and understand the pressures that businesses are going under, not just with the pandemic but also the pressures that the EU transition has brought, and we know also that this affects people's in their personal life and your workforce and your employees' lives as well. So our wellbeing and resilience programme is really designed to help with tackling some of the immediate issues your employees might be facing or you might be facing, but also to help you think long term about putting together a wellbeing strategy in the workplace if you don't already have one. Just a few words on our website as well. We do have a knowledge bank that's packed full of on-demand videos. Quite a lot of those are around EU transition, so do take a look at those. We have articles and blog pieces, We also have an events calendar that not only lists the events that we're running in the county, but also that of our partners and suppliers. And we also have a marketplace. So for some of you who may provide business services or be business consultants, we're very happy for you to have a profile and be listed on our marketplace. To find out a little bit more whether you're a business or a supplier wanting to register, do take a look at our website. It only takes a couple of moments. And that's everything from me. We've got, I know there's a really good selection of speakers and panelists, so I hope you enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Well, unbelievably, we're 1 month shy of 5 years since we had the EU referendum back in June 2016. And still, I think the battle, as I call it, between the Cromwellians, the Remainers and the Brexiteers still seems to be ongoing. I know from the 1st of January, we were inundated at the Chamber, as were Hertfordshire Growth Hub and many others, with various questions regarding the deal. I think things have calmed down a little bit. We're not getting quite so many queries. We couldn't answer them all, I'm sorry, but we did our best. But things are progressing, and although it's a bit of a mixed bag, although I did see a report the other day that apparently our trade with the EU on exports is virtually back to the way it was. Imports down, but we're importing more from other countries, which may be as a result of the various trade deals that we've signed with other countries. But I think somebody with his finger on the pulse, Liam Smith, who's Director of Trade Facilitation at the British Chamber of Commerce. I'm really very, very pleased indeed we've got Liam with us. Liam's been with the Chamber for just over 4 years. Previously, he was Non-Executive Director at Aberdeen Inspire, which was helping Aberdeen's growth and development there, and also Deputy CEO with Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, so a wealth of experience. And to say Liam really has got his finger on the pulse. I know the British Chamber and down in London speak to the government every day virtually on business matters. So Liam, I say very, very honoured indeed to have you with us today, and thank you for coming. Would you like to give us a brief update, please?
I'll do my best, Sean, and just to give you, I'm just going to switch through to a presentation which will hopefully pop up right now, and my brief was to kind of look at what had happened since the end of transition on businesses and what's happening in the business community right now. Some of this I would hope will resonate with you, with some of the people on the call, and perhaps raise some questions for others. So anywho's, without further ado, I think the first thing I always say at this point is that whilst Brexit, the vote happened a long, long time before the end of transition, really this was very last minute for businesses. Whilst we knew that the transition period was coming to an end, we didn't know whether it would be with a deal or without a deal. And rather than having 4 years to prepare, as some politicians have mentioned with regard to business, actually we had more like 3 days to prepare. So the deal was finalised on Christmas Eve. It was published on the 29th of December, along with a new border operating model, which gave businesses very little time. I say 4 days because most people didn't work the 1st and 2nd, but they had very little time to get ready for this change. So, and the change is significant. It's some changes that could not be anticipated and weren't anticipated, and others that, whilst they could be anticipated, businesses had been jaded by no deal, day one no deal deadlines that had come and gone. And for many traders, if we go back to December, there was still a belief that there may be an extension to the transition period, despite that door having apparently closed in June because of delays that had never come to pass or deadlines that had never we'd never fallen off the cliff. People had lost their belief that something truly was actually going to happen, and of course it did. And the impact, actually published this just this morning at 9 o'clock by the ONS. We can see their long-term view of the trading figures. These are trading figures previously published, but a longer-term analysis. So back in March, we had figures published that showed that UK exports were down 19.3%. EU exports to the EU on a comparison quarter one this year with quarter one last year EU were down 40.7, and the rest of the world was up marginally at 1.7. I'm afraid, John, I don't agree with you that this is down to new trade deals that we've signed, as we haven't actually signed really any new trade deals. Every trade deal that we have currently, we had as part of the European Union. The only aside to that potentially is that we signed an agreement with Japan, a bilateral with Japan, but actually they had already signed an EU trade agreement before the end of transition period. So we don't actually have the impact of new trade agreements flowing through just yet, because we don't have any. We have existing agreements that have been carried forward and rolled over into bilaterals, with some changes in quotas, the allocation of quotas that have started to affect, particularly around the steel industry. There's been some effect that we've seen there. But what does this graph show you? Well, it shows you, first of all, I draw your attention to Q1 18 versus Q1 19, where you see what was called at the time the Brexit bounce, and those changes showed that so the dark blue line is the EU trade, showed that actually since the Brexit vote, trade with the EU had actually bounced up the way, and that was celebrated at the time. And in fact, rest of the world trade had also bounced up the way from where it had been in Q1 2018. However, that's largely been eroded to the point whereby since Q1 19, if we compare Q1 21 with 2 years ago, taking out the COVID impact and the disaster that was globally, then we're sitting around about £38 billion of trade less well off than we were in 2019. And that's the massive impact that we know has been felt across supply chains and in our economy. Gee, it must be. And whilst this is for trade, import and export, we know that our exports have fallen significantly with our nearest trading partner, the European Union. So that's just a bit of a precursor. So turning now to the deal, the trade continuity agreement, what was missing from that principally? The big impact that we are seeing for businesses since the end of transition to today is what's missing is diagonal accumulation and full accumulation. So we have bilateral accumulation, which means that content that is EU content that we include in UK produce and export back to the EU can be considered as UK content, but we can't bring in Japanese content with UK content and EU content to reach the threshold for origin, for UK origin. So this has been problematic for lots of businesses in trying to reach the threshold for being able to declare a UK origin, as very often the parts that they bring together for finished product in the UK will in part come from the EU, oftentimes, but more often will come from places like China and Asia and other markets, and be brought into the UK for processing and transformation. So there's knowledge and understanding of how to evidence origin is a big gap in traders, and we hear lots of inquiries from traders who are trying to get to grips with being able to meet the origin requirements of their buyers, the people that they export to. There's also a big gap in understanding of importers' knowledge. So this is where you can accept goods into the UK under preference, and you can say, actually, because I know the exporter well, and they've told me that actually these goods are EU origin, then that's my importer's knowledge, because I asked them. Actually, importer knowledge is much deeper than that. It requires the importer to have a depth of understanding about how those finished goods or those goods were put together, where the component parts came from, what the cost of each component part was, what the cost of the labour that was involved in the production was accounted, what that accounts for, and things like intellectual property values and so on. So it's much more complex than that. And we're seeing a lot of businesses saying, well, I don't need a certificate of origin or a preference certificate from the EU because I've got importer's knowledge. And you say, well, what does that what does that amount to? And actually it amounts to very little when compared with the rules around origin. And also what's missing is that businesses in the UK are discovering that is someone's microphone open there that's coughing. I don't know, it's coming through. Maybe you want to switch your microphone off. And the other thing that's missing is totally tariff-free trade. Businesses in the UK are starting to understand that for trade to be tariff-free, it requires the rules of origin to be met and for the preference, preference to be allowable. Certainly what we are finding in our communication with traders is that for many goods are arriving using staged customs controls into the UK, often without the paperwork that they require, often without the importer keeping records that they ought to keep, and actually they're discovering that they're having to pay tariffs at the border because the goods are, or they will have to pay tariff at the border because they don't have the preference certificates and the importer's knowledge that is required for that. Seems that traders are surprised that, often that nations control borders. And what I mean by that is that we've had lots of circumstances where the same trader exporting the same goods to two different markets in the European Union, two different countries in the European Union, find that they're being treated differently at the border. So the goods arrive in Germany and are accepted by the German customs authority without any hitch, but they arrive in the Netherlands and they're not accepted by the Netherlands customs authority without any hitch. And there's a realization dawning on some people that actually, whilst the European Union is a single market, it's not a single, and has a customs union, it's not a single customs entity. Each nation has its own national border, and it also has its own customs authority. And they don't necessarily all behave in a very unified way. Also, the amount of time that businesses needed to prepare is much greater, and businesses are still preparing right now, 5 months into the end of the transition period, still getting their systems and processes set up, and actually need more time to be ready for example, the end of stage customs control. Also, because traders have not had to deal with paperwork and deal with the issues around sending goods across the EU border for 35 years, actually that corporate brain is gone, and people are starting to realize just how complex trade is. And so the referring to the Growth Hub and referring to the Chambers of Commerce locally is often the first place that they go to get help when they realize just how complex it is. Governments do trade deals and businesses do trade. And we've heard so much in the news about trade deals and rollover trade deals and the like, that actually, for businesses, actually, the government's not going to sell the stuff for you. You've got to go and do your own sales on the back of the trade deals that are done, and actually and get out there. And if we're going to achieve the Department of International Trade's goal of doubling exports by the end of 2030, businesses are going to have to go some to find those markets and get those sales. And finally, behaviours are unpredictable, particularly in a crisis. The behaviours, and I take this right through, we're seeing this through either the haulage community, the freight forwarding community, the realization that most of our trucks are driven by EU drivers who come here, drop a load and take one back. And actually, if you make them go to a truck stop as they did in January in order to have a COVID test, then some of them might decide not to come back. And so what does that do? It puts pressure on the volume of haulage available, which pushes up the price. And when, as I say, behaviours are unpredictable, particularly in a crisis, actually we've seen quite a bit of price inflation in the transport of goods because in this crisis, people have behaved a bit differently to that they would have been expected to. And governments, they've seemed surprised that, when you put too many new systems in place at the same time, that you invite failure. So we've had a whole host of systems in customs, particularly in customs and in DEFRA and phytosanitary systems that either have been launched already or are being launched over this year that have found problems. In the early part of the the year in January and February, particularly we found circumstances where the UK global tariff said something different to how the chief system and CDS system at HMRC was operating. So the tariff said that it expected you to be able to log an import in a certain way, and chief wasn't set up to do that. So we had lots of problems with systems early on, and we've got some other systems coming out and being launched, and border control points that will be launched over the course of this year. So actually, you know, things have not gone so smoothly. Guidance is never enough. The government has populated the gov.uk website with lots and lots of guidance. Guidance is words. It's not enough. Businesses need to be able to rely on advice from experts who understand their problem, who've taken the time to understand it, and actually can give them information that can help them to trade. And that costs money. And it took the government a few months to come up with a grant scheme to be able to fund that kind of activity for businesses. And great, you know, Lisa's also talked about the up to £10,000 of grant funding that's available for you as well, match funded by yourselves. And the thing is that the government's, you know, actually I think failed in the negotiations to get diagonal accumulation, and need to revisit that as for UK traders. That's going to be really critical to the future of our exporting. Some considerations for traders, you know, if you're part of integrated supply chains, you know, that actually you need to be making sure that integrated in the form that you're critical to the supply chain of a customer. You need to do an awful lot of work in terms of how you're going to get the goods to that customer if they're in the EU. Whether you're going to use transit procedures or import controls, or what's the process at the border that you're going to use to get those goods to your customer on time and the way that they expect, and either share the responsibility for the import at the EU side, or deal with the needs for establishment in the EU in order that you can make the import in the EU yourself. So a lot of companies came unstuck when their customers had contracts with them that were for the goods being delivered duty paid, which meant that the UK supplier had to be able to import in the EU. And to import in the EU, you need to have an EU area number. If there's VAT involved, you need to have a VAT number and have an establishment in an EU country in order to do that work. Or you need to find someone that will carry out indirect customs controls on your behalf. I mentioned Percy Pigs here because that's been a big problem for Marks and Spencers, and actually and for some other businesses who have distribution centres in the UK, is this double duty hit. So they bring goods into the UK to redistribute into the EU, and find that actually they may be paying a tariff to bring the goods into the UK depending on the country of origin. For example, China, there is no trade agreement really, and then be paying duty to export those goods back into the EU, where the goods cannot be conferred UK origin. And so a lot of reconfiguring is going on right now with businesses in terms of how they bring those goods from one market to another. In Percy Pigs' case, they were EU origin confectionery brought to the UK for re-export to the Republic of Ireland. And the re-export meant that the Percy Pigs had to pay a duty when they entered the Republic of Ireland. Despite having come from the EU and going back to the EU, you can only confer origin once, and you can only benefit once on preference. So that was an issue. IPR and OPR, so inward processing, outward processing reliefs. The HMRC expect to receive a number of applications for this authorization for IPR and OPR over they expected it from January. It's not happened yet. That may be because of staged customs controls, but for some businesses, operating inward and outward processing relief may be a way to avoid paying duty and VAT on goods that are being brought in to be processed and re-exported. It is a fairly cumbersome system to operate, but it's not impossible. And for businesses where that's their everyday, I can think of a seed business I know about that brings seed from the EU into the UK, processes the seeds and re-exports 99.9% of that seed back to its European customers. So for them, IPR and OPR make absolute sense. That's their system of operation, that's their MO. Stage customs controls were brought in from January the 1st. They were supposed to expire at the end of June, meaning that any goods arriving from the European Union in January would need to have full declarations made in July, those in February and August, those in March and September, and so on. The government has extended that period to the end of December, but that doesn't change the need for January imports to be accounted for in July and February and August, and so on. Now that window is now narrowing. We're now at the end of May, so businesses really need to get a grip of the information and data points that they should have collected between January and today, in order that they're ready to make their supplementary and a full declaration in July for those imports they made in January. And you can make them as a combined, if you had, 5 imports in January, well, you can make one supplementary declaration in July to account for all of the 5 imports. But you need to be able to collect that data, know what data to collect, and be able to work with a customs broker such as Chamber Customs, who can help you to make those declarations on your behalf. And finally, UK origin, the consideration in UK origin is revisiting your inputs. And for some businesses we've worked with, we've been able to advise on finding an alternative input for some of the parts of the product, where they can get those supplied in the UK and not from the EU, that just allow them to tip over the edge into the UK origin threshold. And for some, it's actually revisiting the labour inputs and the IP inputs that they have into that product, that they maybe were undervaluing when they did the calculation themselves. So, an origin expert can help to establish for a UK business how they can achieve UK origin and therefore be able to sell under preference to their customers elsewhere. I don't want to labour the point in origin, but the government has come up with a couple of tools, but they're, in my view, about as useful as a chocolate kettle. So if you go into gov.uk and you search for do the goods originate from the EU, for example, this is rules of origin to determine the origin of the goods from the EU in order that you can get preference in the UK. They give you this opening shot. And in order to understand that, at the bottom of the page, it also says you can use that tool, but before you start, can you read these things? And there are, I think, 10 different hyperlinks. What I say to HMRC is if a business had read all of those pieces of information and understood them, they actually would not need to use your tool. So anyway, the tool is there for the use of, and certainly that information is very useful in helping you to determine whether the goods that you're importing can benefit from origin. John mentioned that we talk to government regularly. I just wanted to give you a bit of a summary there of the organisations that we talk to just around customs, actually. This is just the customs groups. So we're regularly feeding into the IT working groups and thematic groups, as well as with permanent secretaries and secretaries of state, the Strategic Trade Advisory Group. There's a stakeholder review group, and there's also the Joint Customs Consultative Committee that I sit on behalf of the network. I mention this because if there are particular issues that are raising their head, then through John and the team at Hertfordshire, we can be escalating these and raising them. And we've done some work recently around steel tariffs and quotas, where it takes someone in our network to raise an issue for us to genuinely understand what that is. So we welcome input from businesses in your region. Finally, how can we help? Well, Chamber Customs is a customs advisory training and brokerage business. So we can provide advisory services. We can train your people to make customs declarations on behalf of your business. And if you don't want to do that, then we can make the declarations for you. In fact, we've got a training course running this week with 6 businesses across the UK in order that they can make their own declarations rather than going to a broker. We've got 200 agents across the UK. We're in 45 locations. We're trusted by HMRC in our IT systems. We've got direct links to every port in the UK, so we're adaptable. Most brokers only deal with imports and exports around a few ports, but we've got every port covered. We've got lots of capacity, and we've got clear pricing for you, so you get a bill from us, you know exactly what you've paid for, and we're very compliance-led to offer you peace of mind. So that's from me, John. Hopefully that was useful and interesting, and has stimulated some thoughts and questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Liam. Your connection was going a bit funny in and out there, but thank you. It was a great presentation, many points, and I think the survey or the report I read must have been written by somebody pro-Brexit. And this is the problem with reading these things. The people interpret them all very differently. So thank you very much, Liam. Before we go onto the Q&A, and Liam, thankfully, is hanging around for that long with the rest of our panelists, so I'll introduce in a moment. Georgia, could we just do a very quick poll, please? I'll bring up the poll quickly, please. It's really just to get a bit of a steer on where we currently are, as just 3 questions, if people don't mind filling in. Number 1, currently, what is your biggest concern relating to the EU transition? That's multiple choice. So if it's all 7, then far away. Or 6, actually. Yeah, if it's all of the above there at the bottom. It just gives the panelists some sort of feel before we start looking at your questions. I've already got a question on Percy Pig, Liam, which I'll put to you in a second. Okay. Oh, I don't know if I have to fill in mine in as well. Yes, right. Submit. Okay. So the answer, so as you can see from there, the biggest one, importing and export half, regulation and compliance half as well, and then VAT, the biggest. These I don't know, Liam, from what you've seen various polls, but these are the same issues, seem to be all the time.
They are, yeah.
Going away. Next question, please, Georgia. And do get your Q&As in, please. I see I've only got a couple of questions, so please put your questions into the experts. How prepared do you feel your business currently is? So please, that one. It'll be a very interesting one. Okay, that's coming up. So still almost half need some guidance still. Good to see that's gone up, prepared a third, which is good, but we're not prepared still with 11%. So come on, get your questions in. Final question, please, Georgia. Would you like support from the Hertfordshire Growth Hub team? And that will go straight to the Growth Hub team, and they will be in touch with you direct on that one. Thank you. So Liam, thank you, I say, very much indeed for your overview there. Very good point about the borders all being different, that each country different as well, which I think causes a lot of issues. And indeed from Melanie Lord, she's asked, how was the Percy Pig situation resolved? Would a bonded warehouse work? Can the claim for preference then apply for the import into Ireland? Liam, over to you.
Good question, Melanie. I suspect that the way that the Percy Pig solution, you know, what resolved it is, and it's evident in these ONS figures if you dig a little deeper this morning's report, is that one of the biggest declines in trade is between GB and Republic of Ireland. So a bit like the Maginot Line, for those of you who remember what that means, and instead of going through the UK, actually the EU and UK traders that want to get to ROI are going round us. So there's been a huge increase in the volume of EU export or EU goods movements directly into the Republic of Ireland. And remember that when you go into ROI, you can then move the goods easily into the Republic. You can move them easily into Northern Ireland because, in effect, Northern Ireland, for those purposes, remains part of the UK, the EU customs territory. Your specific question: if you move the goods, if the goods remained under customs control and went into a customs warehouse, could you continue to confer origin on them in a movement from a customs warehouse in the UK into Republic of Ireland? Good question, and probably one I'd need to go and consult on. But in principle, it sounds like it should work. But they would be entering the customs warehouse in the UK I have a feeling that I'm not sure is the answer. My feeling is that it won't work because it's a UK customs warehouse, not an EU customs warehouse, although they remain under customs control. But if they were basically stopping off in the UK under customs control en route to Ireland, if the destination was already, this is the answer is, if the destination is determined at the point the goods leave the European Union, then the answer is probably yes. But if the destination is unknown, you can't confer origin from a customs warehouse. So you can't move the goods into a customs warehouse, wait and see where you're going to sell the goods to, and then confer origin on a second movement, because it's a second movement. But if they were simply transiting through the United Kingdom en route to the Republic of Ireland in the case of the pigs, then that would work, I'm pretty sure.
Liam, thank you. Okay, the panel, so we're not getting many questions, the panel should obviously too short, but it was all on the advert. But Vicky Birch is the Senior Trading Standards Officer, Regulatory Services with Hertfordshire County Council. Penny Bygrave, Senior Associate with Data Protection with VWV. Judith Hockin, Associate, she's dealing with immigration with VWV. And Debbie Jennings, VAT Director, Moore Kingston Smith. And Brian Stammers, Dr. Brian Stammers, the lead EU transition advisor, who Lisa mentioned earlier. He's with Hertfordshire Growth Hub. And of course, we have Liam as well here to answer any questions. While we're waiting for, hopefully, for more to come in, perhaps could I just throw this one in? Perhaps, Judith, do you think that businesses will be checked up on by the immigration on the EU settled status of their staff? Do you think that's a possibility? Judith, are you there?
You're muted.
Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Yes, this is all to do with the right to work in the UK, and right to work checks are always done by the Home Office, and it's all to do with that all employers in the UK have a responsibility to prevent illegal working. And after the 30th of June, so on the 1st of July, any EEA and Swiss nationals coming to the UK will have to have permission to work in the UK, unless they've been to the UK prior to the 31st of December 2020. Up until the 30th of June, they can apply through the EU settlement scheme, and it's very straightforward, it's very easy, it's something the Home Office have been very good about. But after that date, they will have to have permission to work in the UK. And just with any other right to work checks, the compliance teams can and will check out.
Okay, thank you, Judith. UKCA and UKCE or CE. This is a question we've been asked a few times. I know what anyone like to jump in? What could happen if products are not labelled UKCA? Are there fines involved? Would anybody like to answer that one at all?
I might be able to.
Thanks, Vicky.
Be able to help a little bit. Yeah, so you have till 1st of January 22 to start applying that UKCA mark, coming away from the CE mark. Now, there's always a difference. Products could be stopped at the borders because they haven't got the right marking on them. Depending on who's stopping it and where it's being stopped and who by, it may come through to the local trading standards department for where that business is based, the importer. this is sort of like all about coming sort of into the GB, and it may be that we just come and talk to you, find out what's happening. If it's in the process and it's just not getting there for the 1st of January, then we'll probably just sort of work with you and through that, and it can be sort of case by case, but to be aware that there is that sort of difference. It might be trading standards that might get to know about it, or it might be the ports that are dealing with it initially, or you may just contact your local authority and say, I'm really not going to be ready for the 1st of January, what can I do? So it's always worth making those contacts with your local trading standards. They are there to help and advise as much as the growth hubs and the chambers, as well as doing the enforcement side of things. The relation to fines, I think it's going to be sort of not, I can't see it happening a lot to begin with, because we're all sort of taking that pragmatic approach to get people through. It's just where maybe you get storage fees whilst it's being held at port, those kind of things, and trying to just get them through. But there are questions being raised about where that marking is being placed. So it might be goods coming in and then they're going to another place within GB to be then labelled up. So again, as I say, it's a sort of case by case situation, but I can't see that initially come the 1st of January that fines and enforcement action is going to be taken from day one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Deborah Compton has sent in a question. In fact, Deborah, quite a lengthy question. You spent time typing it. Do you want to come on live and put that to the panel, please? Deborah, are you there? Just
yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, hi. Yeah, no, it's just that a few of the orders that I've seen go through, well, they're not gone through yet, but there's someone's put on there as DAP cleared Lithuania, and I queried what DAP cleared meant, because usually if you're going to do a clearance in one of the other countries, then you'd have to be VAT registered, wouldn't you? So I think they're taking advice on it, but I just wanted to know for my own knowledge, when it comes to setting up like an establishment in the EU so that you could use that to service all your EU customers, what actually qualifies as an establishment? Could you just set up a warehouse in the Netherlands and then basically apply for a Dutch VAT number and then use that to service all your other countries in the EU? And just submit a Dutch VAT return. Is that how you do it?
Do you want me to take this one?
Please, Debbie.
Yeah. Well, we've done quite a lot around this. It really, you have to look at your supply chain, and the first thing to look at is what are the terms of trade, the Inco terms that you're agreeing with your customer, and essentially there's one point in a supply where you pass your ownership, title to the goods changes, and really then that will determine who's going to get the responsibility for clearing the goods. So if the UK supplier has got to get the goods across to their customer, then it's really who's going to then therefore export. The suppliers exporting from the UK, but then their goods have to be imported into the EU mainland, and that may not either be where the customer is located. So say you've got a customer in Italy, but the goods go Dover-Calais, then somebody has got to import the goods into France and pay the French VAT, which is TVA. And then the goods move across the European mainland. And there's different rules, I think picking up what Liam said, in different countries. For example, it's more straightforward on a practical terms to essentially use the route into the Netherlands, because they have a more streamlined practical process for dealing with it. In France, and again, it comes down to each country applying their own rules, has a more involved system. So what we've been looking at is working with customers and supply chains and saying, well, when you're looking at, do you set up a subsidiary, we just refer to it generically as EU subsidiary, is where are your customers based in the EU? And therefore, if there's majority, say, in France, and you favour Dover-Calais, then it's worth setting up and establishing the most effective supply chain by, in my example, they're using France. But then obviously the goods have then got to move across the EU to where your final customer is. Also, there's been some confusion about the movement of goods and how that then ties into perhaps the terms of trade with the who's selling what to whom. So, for example, if I'm selling from the UK to somebody in Ireland who then sells to somebody in Spain, but the goods go directly from me to Spain, you're looking for, from the point of view of the movement of the goods, for the liabilities to import VAT, could there be duty, etc. So then you have to effectively set aside the supply chain with regard to the agreement for the buying and selling of the goods, and look at the physical movement. And that could then bring perhaps somebody in a different country onshore in a different country, because they are the goods, they take ownership to the goods in a different country to which they're established. And I know I was having a conversation this morning with somebody who's a customs consultant, and we're both saying that people think we're a bit bonkers when we're coming up with this sort of analysis, because it's so different to what the rules were prior to the 31st of December. And picking up on one of the key themes here is that the guidance, the change, and all the information came to the party so last minute that, again, we're still finding that that everybody is learning and living it at the same time.
What about if what if you weren't actually sending them from the UK, i.e. you buy goods in China and you've set up a warehouse in the Netherlands, and you obviously pay the import duty and tax to get it into the Netherlands, and then from there it would be in free circulation, wouldn't it, or not?
It would. The goods would be in free circulation in the European Union, but I can give you a real live example just to back up what Debbie's saying in some respects. We got a business down in the West Country. 95% of their sales were in the European Union prior to end of transition. About 5% in the UK. They're bringing goods in from China and and then distributing from here into the rest of the European Union. For them, all of the goods would have been dutiable. They're narrow margin product. They've had to set up in Rotterdam, and they have a warehouse there, an entity there, which is involved establishing a business entity in the Netherlands, as Debbie described, dealing with VAT across Europe from that entity. And now the goods get delivered in two packages. One very small package comes to the UK, and one very large package goes from China into Rotterdam, where of course they pay duty, but they don't pay it twice. They were paying it into the UK and then into the EU as well. So they just pay the duty once. The other thing I just add to what Debbie says is that the first place to look is not, how do I establish in the EU? The first place usually to look at is the Incoterms, and you've described DAP from Lithuania. So you're being delivered those goods and title passed to you in Lithuania, where the supplier may or may not be, I don't know. But the first place to look at is usually Incoterms, and seeing whether you can negotiate Incoterms that work for you and the supplier, or work for you and the customer, and through which you both are responsible for the customs procedures and accounting for customs in the country in which you already exist. If that doesn't work, then move to establishment. But that's our starting point, is usually, can we renegotiate contract terms?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks to Paul Gershlik, who's come on. I don't know if everyone's looking at the chat. Paul, do you want to just say something about the CE marks? You want to come on there and just say your piece? Are you there, Paul? Or Okay, I don't know if anyone's looked at the chat, but he's just added a point saying that CE mark can apply in the UK for now. There's a transition. Oh, Paul, you've just come up. Okay, do you want to say a few words? Just unmute. No. Okay, so he's saying the CE mark can apply in the UK for now. There's a transition period for products going into the EEA stroke Northern Ireland. They have to still use the CE marking. Oh, Paul, you keep coming on, coming off. Okay, perhaps shall we move on? We'll move on. Okay. Next question, I have one for Penny. Are there any restrictions to data transfers between the EU and the UK?
Am I unmuted? Yes. There are, so at the moment, we have until the end of June a temporary adequacy arrangement. It's called the Bridge, I think. So in terms of data collected up till the 31st of December 2020, the EU GDPR applied to that. From this year, we now have what's called the UK GDPR, which at the moment is completely aligned. So it's for all intents and purposes, the same rules. And as things stand at the moment, the EU are indicating that that regime, as long as it doesn't change, will continue to be adequate, provide adequate protection for transfers in. However, I would say watch this space. There is potentially a cut-off at the end of June if we don't have the adequacy decision by then, where the UK will be treated as a third country. And the ICO are recommending that you have safeguards in place for the end of June in case we do not get an adequacy decision. So for the time being, transfers can continue from the EU to the UK without problem. If we get an adequacy decision, that will continue to be the case and will continue, albeit there will be an element of having to comply with two regimes. There's the UK GDPR and the EU GDPR if they diverge. But if we do not get an adequacy decision, it is absolutely worth having a think now about how you comply from the 1st of July, because there are all sorts of issues around transfers from the EU to the UK that you may have to put in place what's called standard contract clauses, and alongside standard contract clauses you would need an assessment of adequacy. And what I can say is if the EU have not assessed us as being adequate by the end of June, I'm not sure how individual businesses trying to transfer data from the EU to the UK will make that assessment in their own right. But it is worth having a think about it, having a look at what data you have coming in and doing some assessment to see if it is a risk. Looking the other way, so if you're targeting individuals in the EU, if your end customers are consumers in the EU, then you need to be thinking, regardless of whether we get an adequacy decision, if you are caught by the continuing EU rules, there are issues around whether or not UK organisations have establishments in the EU, which would mean that they were caught by the EU rules, and establishment for data protection is not necessarily the same as establishment for that. The definition is slightly different, and there are issues of whether or not UK companies still need to put representatives in place in the EU, regardless of whether or not we get this adequacy decision. But right now, we're waiting for the adequacy decision to be made. That it's not 100%. The indications are that we will be considered adequate, but as long as we have the Investigatory Powers Act on the statute book, it's not certain, because that even pre-Brexit was an issue for privacy campaigners. And I would say watch this space, but do be prepared, because there is the possibility of this cliff edge decision at the end of June. If we do not have an adequacy, experience is that it will be absolute. That you will have to have measures in place from the 1st of July to permit those transfers.
Thank you. Good warning there. Any more questions? So I can't see any in the box at the moment. Oh, yeah, one's popped in. Great, thank you. Could cryptocurrency help with cross-border trade with no risk of exchange rate movements? Would you like to plumb for that one? It's a difficult one.
Well, I'm no expert on currency, John, but my observation is that the idea that there's no fluctuation on cryptocurrency values, of course, is fanciful, because cryptocurrencies do change value, do they not? I mean, if you ask Elon Musk, he can tell you that that's absolutely the case. So it is another currency. I think it's one that is that has been used in trade between large companies, but it's not quite as mainstream as hedging on the value of the euro for a future contract, or indeed the value of the yen or sterling or whatever, which is certainly more commonly used. And I think the principles are the same, whether it's cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, or other non-crypto currencies. But certainly, a lot of the high street banks are equipped now to be able to make crypto exchanges for you if people were minded to do that.
Sure. Brian, did you want to come in there, and did you have so you threw your hands up?
Yeah, I threw my hands up because I couldn't answer a question about cryptocurrencies when we're sort of mostly trading in standard currencies, but it's a very difficult question to answer. What I did want to comment on was a question that I had been advised of before, which is to do with what do you do about international exhibitions in Europe? Can you still go? Yes, you can. Can you still exhibit? Yes, you can. Certainly, the big exhibition halls will be crying out for exhibitors. That's for sure, because certainly the ones I know of in Dusseldorf and in Munich and wherever are very much concerned about whether or not they've got sufficient capacity for exhibitions because of the COVID issue. One thing to bear in mind is there is a necessity, or will be a necessity, to have carnet documentation to cover you.
Brian, you've muted. Brian, you've muted.
That's strange. I didn't. It obviously happened by something in the ether. Yes, you will need carnets in order to cover the documentation support for the exhibition items you're going to take. It may get a little bit confusing if you're having samples that you're going to give out. Whether that goes as far as fridge magnets and pens, I'm not really quite sure, but certainly that's one thing to bear in mind. Slightly off-piste from the question you asked me, but I think it was a question that somebody did raise earlier on.
Smashing. Thank you very much.
I would just add, just briefly, John, that when it comes to samples, people often think, well, as a sample, it was given away for free. Yeah. But in customs terms, everything has a value, so need to be accounted for. So Brian's right. If you're simply going to exhibit, not a problem. Use an ATA carnet, ship out your exhibition materials and bring them back, and then you have no problem. But if you do give out samples or you sell product directly to attendees at an exhibition like a food and drink event or something, then you will have to deal with the customs formalities in relation to those goods that have been sold, any VAT due and any duty paid.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Well, we're very nearly out of time. I can't see any more questions. Should we do very quickly around the room? Anybody want to round up? Should we start down the bottom then? Brian, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, just to say that we undertook a proactive campaign in the first quarter of this year. We contacted something in excess of 400 companies based in Hertfordshire to find out what their status was in terms of EU preparedness. Interestingly enough, 29% at that time said that they were prepared. when we explored in a little bit more detail, we found out that they were less prepared than they thought they were. That compares with your 33% that came out in your little poll that you did just now. Basically, 45% of people were in what I call work in progress and needing further help. So very much consistent with where we're at today. In other words, not a lot of movement. The issues that raised then, the top 5 were, guess what? VAT and duty, rules of origin, import regs and documentation, customs hold-ups, and export regs and documentation. Exactly the same list as we now have. Our role was very much frontline, and it still is very much frontline. We have 5 advisors, all of whom are experienced business people who are there to help companies, not only with EU transition, but also with other aspects of business. Lisa mentioned earlier on possibilities of grant support for various specific projects. We're also, I suppose, trying to wade our way through the plethora of information which descends on us from government like confetti at a wedding. The bottom line is what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort to mix my metaphors, the meat from the gravy, and sort out the things that are really important for people, particularly with EU transition. And what we've done is we've put together a support pack that we can select certain items from as and when we get a request for support for EU transition, or indeed any other area of support for business in Hertfordshire. So that's really where we're coming from. We're there to support you. It's a free of charge service. As and when we get into a situation where we need detailed, specific and expert advice, we have the right directions to take people in order that they should get expertise rather than generalist advice.
Great, thank you, Brian. Judith, any last words?
No, not really, apart from just to emphasise about going back to your right to work question, that up until the 1st of July, employers can continue to check an EEA national's passport as evidence of their identity. But certainly after the 1st of July, it will have to be either the EU settled status or some other form of identity to be enabled to work. And it is quite straightforward, the EU settlement scheme. So if you do have any employees who wish to do this before the 30th of June, then, please tell them it is not something that they cannot do easily. The Home Office have made it quite self-explanatory on the gov.uk website, so encourage them to do so. And if any of your members do have any queries at all, immigration related, if they want to go through you, then I'm quite happy to answer some generic questions by email.
Smashing, thanks, Judith. I've got one last question pop up. We are very short on time. I'll try and get to it. Debbie, anything from you, please, just to get around everyone.
Yeah, the thing I think picking up on Liam's theme is be proactive. Try and work out what talk to where you fit in the supply chain, have an open mind, and before you commit to things, just ask yourself the what ifs. Think about the physical movement of the goods and who is doing what at each stage. The critical thing with goods is only one point where the title changes from person A to person B. And obviously, up until that point when title changes, so if I'm providing them to Liam, say he's in Italy, again, picking it up, where do we agree that my responsibility starts and ends and his picks up? Because up until I'm responsible for all the requirements, the compliance, etc. Then after then he is. And obviously you want to make sure that all of that's covered in the contract and the associated costs, duties, VAT, and critically proactivity means there's more chance of efficiencies and avoiding irrecoverable costs that you just can't recover because perhaps the things just weren't set up in the right way because you didn't know.
First place, yeah, smashing. Thank you for sound advice, Debbie. Vicky, any last thoughts from your side?
Just to sort of follow on from what others have said, really, is knowing where you are in the supply chain for lots of various sort of aspects, but also for product liability. So there's a lot of change for obviously from a lot of distributors going to now importers. So check the regulations relevant to your product, see what those obligations are on you, and see whether you are changing from being that distributor to the importer of goods into GB, and then the confusing things of whether you're supplying Northern Ireland as well. But yeah, certainly challenging for all of us.
Thank you, Vicky. And
Thank
Penny.
you.
You're on mute still.
Back on it. I would just to repeat what the previous speakers say. Understand not just your goods and your supply chain, but your data flows. What information is coming in, from where, and just to be going in with open eyes, and be ready just in case the worst case scenario happens on the 30th of June.
Smashing. Thank you very much indeed. Liam, just before we continue, Rosella, are you still there? Do you want to quickly ask your question? I'm being very nice to you here. We've gone over time. I think, Rosella, do you want to fire away? And then we'll have a final word from Liam just as we finish off. I think it might be Liam that answers this.
I'm happy to answer it as well, yeah.
You are fantastic. Rosella, do you want to shoot your question at us? We can't hear you. Although I can't see a mute on.
Well, let me cover it then. Rosella.
Hi everybody. The question is, if we import to the UK, we sell lift chains. So say lift chains from Korea, China, or other country like that, in a very big quantity. And we split this quantity and we resell in the EU. Is this one still a UK country of origin, or is this still China, Vietnam, or something like that?
Yeah. So the answer is that simply taking a long piece of chain and cutting it into parts doesn't constitute sufficient transformation or sufficient processing, rather, of the goods. If you were to bring, so the answer is no. You cannot confer origin on those goods. The origin remains as Vietnam, Korea, or China, wherever the goods have come from. If you were to bring steel and manufacture chain from that steel and sell it in lengths, then you would be able to confer UK origin, because you've taken a raw material, you've transformed it into something that it wasn't previously, and you've changed tariff code, and therefore you would be able to confer UK origin. So in your case, simply bringing in bulk and cutting it into lengths is not sufficient processing, Rosella, in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And so final thoughts for anyone on the call who needs help with customs matters is to get in touch with Hertfordshire Chamber, who can get the support of Chamber Customs to have your goods cleared at the port, and also our advisory services are available with grant funding from HMRC as well, to give you the advice that you may need specific to your business, and we'd be very happy to look at any issues that you have and to see whether we can help you.
Liam, Penny, Brian, Debbie, Judith, Vicky, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for participating. I hope you've got something out of this. I certainly learned a lot today, as I always do. Thank you all, and see you all very soon. All the very best. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.